In today's Whiteboard Leadership moment, we want to talk about another leadership distinctive of a healthy leadership culture, and that's the focus. And then the focus should be this, that we exist for those who aren't here yet. Now before I go into this, let me back up a little bit and just remind you of the purpose of the church. Jesus said in Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, he said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth, go and make disciples of all nations. So we're supposed to go and make disciples of all nations, not just disciple the ones who are in our congregation, but we exist for those who aren't here yet. We're to constantly look for those on the outside of the church, on the outside of our congregation, in order to help them meet, know, and follow Jesus. But it has more implications than that, this statement does, because there's also people who are inside your ministry and people who are outside your ministry. People who are inside your small group and those who are outside your small group. But we exist for those who aren't here yet. Now, the reason we emphasize this reaching tension is because it's the natural bent of a person to stay comfortable, to just enjoy what they have, to be a good manager and steward of what exists there. And so I'm going to steward the relationships I already have, but I'm not going to make any room for those who aren't here yet. I'm going to steward the resources I have for myself, but I'm not going to invest in those who aren't here yet. So we've got to make sure, at least in our culture, we had to make sure to lean into the reaching side of outsiders rather than just focusing on the impacting of insiders. And this chart is backwards of most of the charts you would see, because the low end is over here on the bottom right-hand side, and the high end is here on the bottom left and on the top right. And so what I've got here is impacting insiders on this level, and then reaching outsiders on this level. The reason I did this is because you'll see this curve. If you go back to Whiteboard Leadership moment number 13, it'll talk about creating and facilitating change in your church. And so and it'll explain a little bit more about this curve. This is called the Rogers Curve of Innovation. And typically what we have is innovators and early adopters are on this side, and the middle adopters, late adopters, and laggards. Laggards don't like to change at all. Their motivation, they think it's scriptural, we shall not be moved, but they don't make any kind of change. So what we've got here is a kind of an evaluation for the ministries of your church. There are a whole lot of ministries that are very good at reaching outsiders, but they may not impact insiders very much. We call those things outreach. And in the church, we also call that our future. Because when any generation of the church doesn't focus on those who aren't here yet, they have just started the death clock for the church, because you've always got to reach new people. You'll see this in churches that are growing much, much older with no young people coming into them. That's a group that hasn't focused on this. They focused on the other side, which is this side over here, where really they focus on the past. This group is very low on reaching outsiders, but also is very low on impacting insiders, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Up in this quadrant up here, you see the church ministries, the small groups, and the events, and the ministries that are very high in impacting insiders and high in reaching outsiders. In other words, they're growing ministries. The people who are inside the ministry really love it, and the people who are new to the ministry really love it. It may be a small group that is multiplying and growing because they are inviting new people to come in, and there's just something great about new people coming into a small group because it brings fresh perspectives, and it really is enjoyable to see these young Christians especially grow up in their faith. And so I'm just going to call this is the core. This is the core of ministry. We want to both reach outsiders and impact insiders. And then over on this side, this quadrant, you see that they're very high in impacting insiders, but they're declining significantly in reaching outsiders. A whole lot of ministries have this great time where they're growing a lot and they're impacting a lot, but then eventually they get comfortable. And so I'm going to call this the comfort zone. The comfort zone happens when we begin to focus on those people we already have more than the people that we're trying to reach. And the comfort zone feels really great. It feels like a great place to be, but eventually, if you notice, the curve goes down into this area where we're talking about the past, where the methods that got us there, the methods that got us to enjoy it, those methods have changed, or maybe the pastors changed, or the leader has changed, or the focus has changed, but we've turned very inward, and we've stopped focusing on people on the outside. We've stopped bringing in fresh blood, fresh innovations, fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, and eventually it just goes bad. So what do you do with this? What if you have a ministry that's in this area where the future rests on this, that it's reaching outsiders? And well, the fact is, once you're reaching outsiders, they become insiders. And now you have to figure out how to reach those people who are already there. Think about Pentecost for a second. There were 120 people in the church, and then Pentecost happened, and then there were 3,120 people in the church. And this all began with Peter's preaching. But then in Acts chapter 2, they had to focus on worship, fellowship, prayer, the apostles' teachings, things like that. And they began to figure out how to impact insiders while not giving up the idea of preaching to the crowds. And so they had to do both. And so what you want to do with the future is you want to invest in it. Make sure that you are trying things. Make sure that you are experimenting. Make sure that new things are happening in your church. You're not just saying the old way is good enough. You're trying new things, new ways to reach new people. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. In order to reach people you've not been reaching, you have to do things that you've not been doing. And then in the core, those things that are actually reaching outsiders and impacting insiders, they're probably innovations you want to do, but they're small tweaks, they're incremental kind of things. But you want to optimize these things. You want to make sure that you're doing the best possible job you can do to make these things continue to reach outsiders and continue to impact insiders. And if you're in the comfort zone, then you have to reinvent this to actually be attracted to those who aren't here yet. How do I take this thing that's impacting insiders really well, but how do I allow new people into the small group system? How do I allow new people into the Sunday school class? How do I allow new people into the event or new people into the service? What do I do over there? And then finally, when it comes to the past, these things are low in impact with insiders and low in reaching outsiders. I have a friend who says this: if the horse is dead, it's time to dismount. In other words, you need to kill it, or you need to resurrect it in a new form, in a new way. But it's dead, and so you might as well let go of it. Here's what I want you to do with this conversation. I want you to look at the different ministries of your church and define where they are on this curve. If you had to put them on a curve somewhere, where would you put them? And then take the step to reinvent, to optimize, to resurrect, or to invest in that, whatever that ministry may be. This has been a Converge Whiteboard Leadership Moment. To learn more about Converge or to join us, check out converge.org.